This is something that happened back when I was 19. During that time period, I lived at home with my parents, and I worked at the local Dollar Tree. I was a part-time employee, and would usually work anywhere from 2 to 4 nights per week. And usually it was always night shifts, many of them closing. Our store was generally pretty quiet, and when we closed, we usually only had 1 or 2 employees working. I remember that one night, after a pretty average shift, I came home and was eating before bed. That night in particular, I had gotten off a little before close, which was 10 p.m., and my coworker had locked the doors and stuff. So it was about 10:30 at this point, and both my parents said goodnight to me and headed off to bed. I was having some pizza and sitting in the living room watching something on TV. After this, I was going to go to bed myself. I was pretty tired from the long day. Now, our living room is at the front end of the house. There's a large window that looks out to the front yard, and you can see the driveway as well. As I was sitting there on the couch, I saw headlights through the window as if somebody was turning into our driveway. I didn't know who it could be. My younger brother was 16 and had his license at the time of the story, but he was home and in his bedroom playing video games. I turned around and looked out the window. I saw a car pulling into the driveway that looked to be a smaller sedan and was a dark color. The car stopped at the back of the driveway, and surprisingly, the headlights then turned off. This was a little creepy to say the least, and I kept watching to see if anybody would get out. But for probably 2 or 3 minutes, nobody did. I could tell that the car was still running. Then, the car backed out of the driveway and drove off. I figured that someone was either lost or had the wrong address or something. Maybe they just wanted to turn around and turned off the lights not to shine them at our house. I continued watching TV and forgot all about it. I kind of got hooked onto the TV show that I was watching, and I wasn't really as tired as I had been just minutes earlier. Probably an hour or so went by. By now, it was almost midnight. I was still sitting there on the couch, and I heard a car coming from outside, and I looked and saw a car pulling into the driveway again. It was the same car as before. Now this was really strange. By this time, the car's engine turned off. My heart started to beat a little faster when it did. Then I heard a door open, and I saw somebody start to get out. I moved from where I was. I wanted to make sure that whoever it was didn't see me, and that our front door was locked. I moved over and away from the window and saw that the door was in fact locked. Then, whoever was there made it to the front step. When they did, they tried opening the door. It was really shocking to me, and I went to the window to see who it was. I was careful not to let them see me, and I saw a man standing there. He was a bigger guy with really long, dark, and curly hair. His hair went past his shoulders, and I had never seen him before. This really creeped me out, and I ran to my parents' bedroom and knocked on their door. Meanwhile, I didn't hear any knocking at our front door from the guy who was there. It seemed like he had only tried to enter. After a minute or so, my dad got up and asked me what was going on. I told him about the guy at the front step, and my dad went over to investigate. When we got back to the living room, though, the man wasn't there anymore. I looked out the front window, and his car was gone too. Still, I was afraid that he would return. My dad checked around the house, but there was no sign of anybody. So after that, I went to bed. Nothing else happened that night. The next day, though, I worked again at the Dollar Tree. It was one of my typical shifts, which was 4 to 10 p.m., and at first, things were kind of busy, and I was working with 2 other employees. That soon turned to 1 other employee, and as the night went on, things only got quieter. Then, at about 9 p.m. or so, with the store being extremely quiet, my coworker left. I would be closing the store tonight because my coworker had done it the previous night. So during the final hour, I only recall one lady shopping for a few minutes, and then she left. That is, until probably 9:30. At that point, I saw a man walking into the store. When I saw him, my jaw dropped. I thought that I recognized him from something, and then I realized what it was. He was a big guy with long, dark, and curly hair. Was it the man who was at my house last night? I looked out into the parking lot and saw a smaller car, just like the one that had been in our driveway. This made me extremely nervous. I was all alone inside the store with him. I thought about calling my coworker and asking her to come back, but I decided not to. I tried to play it cool. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe this guy didn't know that it was my house last night, or maybe he didn't know that I worked here. He seemed to be walking around the store, but I couldn't tell exactly where he was. The guy was out of my sight for maybe 5 minutes. Then I saw him appear again towards the front. He wasn't going to buy anything though, and he just left. I was glad to see this. The man walked back out to his car and got inside. But he didn't drive away. I kept an eye on him, and I hoped that he would leave. When a little more time went by and we didn't get any more customers, I decided to lock up and just leave. I wanted to get home and away from this guy. I quickly walked through the store and made sure that everything was fine and nobody else was there. I didn't bother to organize any of the shelves, and I went to lock up. When I got to the doors, the guy's car was still there in the parking lot. After I had finished and was about to walk to my car, I realized that I would have to walk past him. I was parked towards the back of the lot, and the guy was across from me, but closer to the store. There were other stores very close by in the shopping center, but in the parking lot space for Dollar Tree, it was just our two vehicles. I decided that I would just go for it and began walking to my car, but I took no more than 5 steps before I saw and heard the door start to open to the man's car. Instantly, I turned around and started walking down the sidewalk area in front of the store. There were a few other stores connected to the Dollar Tree, and I suddenly had the idea to go inside one of them. I would feel much safer if I could do that. But the first few stores were closed. Meanwhile, as I walked, I could hear the man walking now behind me. He was a decent ways back, but definitely following me. I didn't bother to look behind me at all. There was a Target store that appeared to probably still be open. The parking lot had a decent amount of cars in it. When I got closer, I saw somebody walking in, and I felt much better. Soon, I had made it to the Target. The man was still walking behind me at about the same following distance. After walking inside Target, the man followed me in. I decided to start walking up and down the aisles. As I did this, I got out my phone and texted my mom. Meanwhile, the man was trailing me a ways back, wherever I would go. My mom texted me back, saying that she could come and pick me up. I thought about trying to get back to my car. In that isolated part of the parking lot, I didn't want to risk it. I asked my mom if she could, and she said that she would be there in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, I had to keep walking all around, up and down the aisles of Target. Every time I got into a new area, I would see the man a ways back. I kept looking at my phone over and over, hoping that my mom would be there already. At last, she told me that she was out front in the parking lot. I started walking to the front end of the store, and the man was still behind me. He was maybe about 40 feet back or so, if I had to guess. When I got to the doors and they opened, I could see my mom's car. That's when I started running. I sprinted for her vehicle and I got inside as fast as I could. We both saw the man walking out of Target, and my mom quickly drove away. We were a good distance from where the man's car was, and we were able to make it back home all right without being followed. When we got home, I gave my keys to my dad, and my mom drove him to my car so that he could bring it back to our house. When they got back to my car, luckily the man was gone. I stayed up late that night, hoping that the man wouldn't go to our house again, and luckily he didn't. Since that experience, I never saw him after that. I realized that he probably saw me working that first night that he showed up at my house. I just hadn't seen him at all. I must have not noticed or remembered him. I certainly did when he entered the store that next night, though. My name is Amanda, and this happened a few years ago when I was younger. During that time, I lived with my 2 brothers, my sister, and my parents. We were hanging out one night, and between all of us, we would run out of things quickly. My siblings and I were hungry, and me, being one of the older siblings, and 17 at the time, offered to go to the store. Everyone else was busy doing their own thing, so I left the house and got inside my car. I was only planning on getting a few things and would not be gone for too long. The closest store to us was a Family Dollar that was probably less than 5 minutes away. I decided to go there because it was so close, and plus, the prices were really cheap. By this time, it was maybe 8 p.m. or so. I got to Family Dollar and I went inside. Once in the store, I saw a few other people shopping. I made my way to the snack aisle and started looking around. There were a few things that my siblings had specifically asked for. Like, for example, I know somebody wanted the TGI Fridays potato skins. I was looking around and having a difficult time finding them when a man approached me. He said, "Need help finding anything?" Just out of instincts, I said, "No thanks." I knew that what I was looking for was nearby and in this aisle. The guy then started walking away. I hadn't even looked at him, but as he left the aisle, I did. I realized that the man didn't even work there. He was just wearing a t-shirt and jeans. A little strange, but whatever. I went back to shopping. I found a few things and put them in the shopping basket that I had. Then I made my way to the next aisle over. I started out being the only person in that aisle, but soon, the same man approached me again. This time, he walked about 5 feet away from me or less and just kind of stared in my direction. I kept looking at the items on the shelves until I could tell that he was staring at me. Then I looked over. The man was looking at my basket and he started saying the products that I had in it. Chips, trail mix, Coca-Cola. Fun night planned? I just kind of laughed and said I was just picking up some snacks. The man asked me if I lived around here. I said sort of. By the way, this guy was much older than me and gave me a sort of creepy feeling immediately. He asked me a couple of more questions, like what neighborhood I lived in and who I lived with. I found the questions to be odd, and I gave as basic responses as I could. The man asked me what else I was getting, and I said a couple of other things. I decided to walk out of that aisle because it seemed like the conversation had sort of ended. But the man then walked with me to the next aisle. It was really awkward, and I couldn't even think of what else I wanted to get anymore. I think I grabbed like 1 or 2 more things, and then just sort of walked around. The guy would not leave me alone. After awkward silence, he asked me if I needed a ride home or anything. I told him no, I drove myself there. The guy then asked me if I wanted to hang out with him. I told him no thanks. I headed to the checkouts then. I just wanted to get out of there and away from that creep. When I did, he started to follow me to the checkout. The uncomfortableness was unbelievable. Finally, I made it to the checkout area and the guy was still standing right next to me, as if we had gone there together. He even offered to pay for my items, but I said no and I paid myself. After that, I started to leave, but I had a bad feeling like the guy was going to follow me home. I happened to notice that there were a few bathrooms nearby. I walked over to one, and the man kind of stopped when he realized I was going to use the restroom. When I got inside, I locked the door. I didn't have to use the bathroom, but I just wanted to get away from the guy. I stayed in there for a while. I didn't really have a plan, but I thought maybe if I was in there for a long time, he would leave. I just went on my phone in there and waited for like 15 minutes. When I came out, the man wasn't there anymore. I saw the woman working at the counter that I had checked out at. She looked sort of concerned. I went over to her and asked her if the guy was still there who had been standing near me. The woman said that he walked towards the back of the store. She said that he was just standing around the bathrooms and she asked him if he needed help with anything. The guy then just said no and walked away. She asked if I knew him. I told her no, and I told her how he wouldn't leave me alone. She said she could kind of tell, and just as we were talking, the man started to come back into sight from the back of the store. He walked over to me and said, "Ready to go?" The employee asked the man if he even knew me, and he said yes. She then told him that she knew he was lying. The woman threatened to call the police right there if the guy didn't leave. And luckily, he actually did. After he was gone, I was able to drive back home and make it safely. And I'm happy to say I never saw that guy again. To start out, this story takes place a few years ago. I'm a female and was still a minor at the time, and looked it. I went to the Dollar Tree with my great aunt. When we were there, she told me that I could go around the store and pick out 5 items and she would buy them for me. I started by looking at the stuffed animals because I really wanted to get one for my cat to play with. As I was looking through them, I noticed a man, a bit older than me, at least mid-20s, looking at me. He was probably about 10 feet away. I didn't really think anything of it at the time, so I continued to find a stuffed animal for my cat. I finally found a small blue teddy bear that would be perfect for her. I looked at a couple of more things in the toy aisle, and as I was around there, I turned to see the man again. He noticed that I saw him, and he grabbed the nearest item to him and pretended to look at it. It was pretty odd, but I didn't want to act as if I was alarmed, so I just went to a different aisle. I can't remember which one it was exactly, probably one of the snack aisles, but I once again saw the man, who was still kind of keeping his distance. I was browsing around, but I had the idea to test if he actually was following me or not, so I went down the feminine hygiene aisle, and sure enough, the man followed me down there, all while he was trying to keep his distance. Don't panic, I was saying to myself. I should have went and found my aunt again right then and there, but being the dumb kid that I was, I just looked around the store for more things. After probably about 5 or 10 minutes, all while he was still following me but keeping a distance, I saw my aunt again and showed her the 5 items that I picked out. I think it was some stickers, a pair of socks, and some candy, and the teddy bear for my cat. The man finally stopped following me after I was back shopping with my aunt. Looking back at that now, I could have easily been kidnapped or something due to not finding my aunt immediately, as the store wasn't very crowded, so there was nobody around to see. Thankfully, him following me was all that happened, and it could have been so much worse than it was. This has still been the scariest thing to ever happen to me. This is a story of something really scary that happened to me while shopping a few years ago. I went to a Dollar General store in the town I work in after I got off of work to pick up a few household items. I really like shopping at those stores. They're usually not very crowded, and it's a good place to get basic things since they have really good prices. I'd been inside for a few minutes and already got most of the things that I needed. When I went into the aisle for the last of what I needed, I noticed there was a man just standing in the middle of it, pacing back and forth, babbling some kind of gibberish. His clothes were extremely dirty, and his pants and hoodie were both full of holes. He had his hood up over his head, so I really didn't get a good look at his face, but I could see that he had an unkempt beard. I had to go around him and couldn't help but notice he smelled horrible. I'm not one to judge people, but the smell was just too bad and even made me gag a little. The man just gave off a bad vibe overall, too. There was music playing in the store, and all of a sudden, the man randomly started singing along with it. He wasn't singing along with the words, but was kind of laughing to the tune of the song while singing simultaneously. It was by far the most random thing I'd ever seen anyone do. I didn't know who in their right mind would act like that in public, but I just brushed it off like whatever and tried to finish my shopping. The man kept doing it and was now dancing to the music as he got closer to me. I decided I'd go to the next aisle over to put some distance between myself and the man. I hoped that if I just ignored him, he would either get bored of it or find someone else to bother. It was turning into a really sketchy situation, but I didn't think it was worth confronting the guy over it. I killed some time by just looking over everything in the aisle and thought maybe the man would be gone so I could go back for what I needed. Then I saw the man again, and he was following another customer who was a middle-aged man. The guy was still singing and dancing to the music. I could tell the other customer was getting annoyed and trying to ditch the man too. Then the guy practically leaned over to the other customer's shoulder and was singing as loud as he could. It startled the other customer, and he turned around and said, "What's your problem, you weirdo?" That must have set off a trigger within the man, and he then started shouting and cursing at me at the top of his lungs. The other customer just looked at the man with a stunned look on his face. It seemed like he was getting ready to fight the man when he started pounding his chest like a gorilla and screamed. The other customer screamed and took off running away from him. I watched as the man chased him all around throughout the store, in and out of aisles, and knocking things off the shelves as they went. I couldn't believe this was actually happening. I didn't know if the guy was high on something, drunk, or had a mental health problem, but the fact that he had completely lost his mind was plain to see. His mood had gone completely 180. The other customer ran in front of the aisle I was in, with the crazy man still after him. Then, the crazy man tripped and fell when his foot caught on the bottom of a shelf. He noticed me when he got back up, and then pointed at me. He made a noise that I don't even know how to describe, and I would have thought a human couldn't make such a sound. I screamed and ran for it. The crazy guy picked up an item in a box off the shelf and heaved it at me. Luckily, it didn't come anywhere close to hitting me and just fell to the floor, which probably broke whatever was inside. As I was running out of there, I came across the store manager who came to investigate all the commotion. He asked what in the blue F was going on in here, understandably angry about the disturbance. I said there's a crazy man who's been trying to attack another customer and myself. Just then, the crazy man saw us. He made that awful noise again and charged us. The manager said to get out of his store now. That didn't faze the man at all, and he kept going towards us at full speed. The manager picked up his foot, and as the guy reached him, he delivered a karate-style kick to the crazy man, which caught him square in the chest. It dropped the crazy man and knocked him out for a few moments. The manager asked me if I was okay, and I said that I thought I was, still in shock of what had just happened. He then told me to make a run for the exit, and he was going to evacuate the entire store as well as call the police. I didn't waste any time in making a run for the exit. While I was on the way out, I heard the manager announce over the store intercom for everyone to please evacuate the store immediately for your own safety. When I got outside, I saw a couple of police cars come flying into the parking lot. It turned out the other customer the crazy man chased got out after the crazy man set his sights on me and called the police himself. It was a pretty big town, so their police department was able to get officers to the scene super fast. A few other customers came running out of the store along with the employees and manager. The officers got out and the manager told them the crazy man was still inside, destroying everything. We could see glimpses of him through the glass, running around in there and laying waste to the store. It looked like a tornado had ripped through the place. The officers ran inside and a few other police cars arrived to the scene as they entered, along with an ambulance. The second wave of officers ran in to help while the paramedics checked on everyone to see if anybody needed medical attention. We all watched and waited for them to come out with the guy. In the meantime, the manager kept apologizing to everyone about the whole ordeal and made sure that nobody was hurt. I was glad that he was there to put a stop to the crazy man's rampage, long enough for everybody to get out safely. It took a while, but all the officers finally came out, dragging the crazy man with them. He was still trying to fight the officers and making his disturbing noises. They had put a lot of restraints on him and put a spit hood over his face too. After they finally got him in the back of one of their cars, the officers came over to make sure we were all okay. They said that when they found the crazy man inside, he was defecating in the middle of one of the aisles. The crazy man even tried to fight the officers, and they ended up having to use a taser on him a few times to make the arrest. They also discovered that he vandalized the restroom by stuffing a bunch of toilet paper and paper towels in the toilet and sink, making them both overflow. One officer said the crazy man was most likely on heavy drugs, and that's what made him act like he did. We all gave the officers our statements for what happened, and our contact information if they had any more questions. The manager went back inside with some of the officers to get the footage from the store surveillance cameras and to inspect all of the damage. The other arresting officers drove the man out of the parking lot and took the crazy guy away. We all felt sorry for them because it couldn't have been a very pleasant ride with him in the car. I decided I might as well forget about my shopping, and I went home to try to collect myself. I was still shaken up from the whole thing. I followed the news for the next few days and found out the guy's name and that he was in fact under the influence of drugs when he came into the store. He was being held in the town's jail until his court date. I never heard what ended up happening to him after that, but I was just glad that he was in custody where he belonged and couldn't hurt anyone. Hopefully, he got the help that he needed while he was there too. The Dollar General had to be closed for a few days to clean up the damage, and so the employees could recover from the trauma. I never have gone back to that Dollar General since that incident, and I don't think I ever will. I'm sure that the man was banned from ever going into that store again. It just brings up bad memories for me, and I couldn't help but think that someday the crazy man would return to seek some kind of horrible retribution. The whole thing was a really traumatizing experience for me, and it's made me a lot more leery whenever I go out shopping ever since. That just goes to show you that you never know what people are capable of, and how quickly things can take a turn just going about your daily routine.